Well, joining us now is James Murphy, the Chief Executive of Adam and Eve Advertising Agency, who you saw in that report. And while many business leaders have expressed open support for the Conservative position on Europe, we've asked the Conservative MEP Daniel Hannan to put their case. He joins us from Brussels. Let's start with you, James Murphy. Do you look forward to the day that Britain leaves Europe, and what impact would that have on Adam and Eve?
I wouldn't look forward to it. We do a huge amount of work with Europe, and much like the rest of the UK economy, 78% of our economy is based on service industry, and we are a huge, huge net exporter into the European Union. It's an extremely dangerous and precarious situation. There's a lot of jobs at stake.
Daniel Hannan, that sounds a bit sort of ominous.
First of all, absolutely nobody is suggesting that we would give up our position in the free market in Europe. No one in Brussels, and no one except some tendentious British pro-Europeans. I've never heard anyone here suggest that we wouldn't have the same sort of deal that Switzerland has, or that the Channel Islands have, if you think that Switzerland's too exotic. In other words, free movement of goods and services and capital, but living under our own laws. So I don't see that there would be any impact in that sense. What there would be is far greater opportunity to sign bilateral trade deals with countries outside the EU. The Swiss have signed, for example, a bilateral trade agreement with China. We can't do that. We can't sign a trade deal with anyone. We have to do it through Brussels. The Swiss are negotiating one with India.
Prince Andrew to China? Why are we sending Prince Andrew to China with others to do business when there's no business to be done?
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, come on, they come back with $1 billion. Last time they came back with £2 billion worth of exports.
Yes. Yes, they go and do this kind of trade promotion stuff, but they do it extraordinarily for a trade delegation without the power to sign a trade treaty. We can't do that, and the EU is not talking to China, unlike Iceland and Switzerland who have one. Now, when you bear in mind that China grew at 6.6% last year, while the EU was stagnant and the Eurozone shrank, I would say that puts us at a disadvantage.
Well, you're in the market, so you're cutting your nose off. You can't do
this
with China.
I mean, I appreciate that it's a very rarefied atmosphere in the political class in Brussels. All I would say is, whatever may be happening in the EU, we grew by 25% last year. Almost 60% of that growth came from Europe, and it came from Europe for a simple reason, which is the service industries in this country are superlative. Certainly the marketing services industries are the best in the world, and we're able to export and export with confidence. Our European partners are moving work into this country. That's why we have such a big trade surplus. And I think that whilst we export to the rest of the world very, very easily, we have a great relationship with European clients, and more European businesses are looking to do business with businesses like ours in the UK.
Dan Hannan?
To repeat, no one is prejudicing the cross-channel trade. I mean, Norway, Switzerland, all of these countries have complete free trade with the EU. And by the way, I can't help noticing that they're doing pretty well. They're also growing extremely well. It is true that we have a slight surplus in services with the EU. We have a big deficit in goods with the EU. It kind of balances out. But what I think is undeniable is that the biggest opportunities, I think I get this from every company in my constituency, whatever its sector, the biggest opportunities are not in Europe. They're on more distant continents where the growth rates are better, where the demographic profile is more attractive. It is bizarre for us, a mercantile maritime country, to have attached itself to the only customs union on the planet that is experiencing zero economic growth. Surely we could lift our eyes to more distant horizons and rediscover our global vocation.
Do you not lie awake at night wondering about the reforms that need to be made to Europe?
I don't think any of us have a problem with the idea that there's a need for reform in Europe. And I think we would wish the government well in going to renegotiate on some of these elements. But I think the issue that we're dealing with here is one that, and I don't know whether Mr. Hannan has ever started a business, run a business, built a business, but when you're out there on the front line, it's not about ideology, and it's not about being a Europhile or a Eurosceptic. It's actually about building businesses, creating jobs, and sustaining that in the long term. So this is a level of uncertainty that we just don't need, and too much of it is being driven by narrow ideology rather than practical experience in the business world.
Have you ever built a business or run one?
You know, I think it's actually a slightly tendentious thing that you didn't have a Eurosceptic businessman here to make that case, and it's not a fair way to frame the debate, because there are plenty of exporters and entrepreneurs who understand that there are better opportunities than under the current deal. But to repeat, absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
Yeah, but we got you on specifically because you're articulate in this matter. You're articulate in this matter, and unfortunately a lot of the businessmen are actually doing business. I mean, and that is the difficulty.
Well,
this is going to be in the hands of the politicians who've never run a business.
Well, the businessmen, indeed, the businessmen who are running businesses have less time to appear on programs. Very often, therefore, what you get is a kind of corporatist view from CBI types, which is then repeated as if it were the voice of business. But actually, it's a much more varied view than that. When businesses are professionally polled rather than self-polled by the CBI, they say that the costs of EU regulation outweigh the benefits of the single market. Now, of course, that isn't true for every single business. It depends what sector they're in, what they do. But I'm going to say this one last time. No one in Brussels, I've been here for 16 years, has ever suggested that if we withdrew from the political aspects of union, we would be excluded from the free market.
Daniel Hannan, James Murphy, thank you both very warmly for coming in.